I think there's a number of factors that leads to someone being caught up in the justice system. One of the factors is really identifying how the justice system was created. And when I talk about that, I talk about in terms of policing in this country. For those of us who aren't aware, policing in this country stemmed from slave catchers. The system of slavery throughout this country, where government-sanctioned individuals were set out there to apprehend runaway slaves, to deter them through violence and all kind of means in order for them to not, run away from their masters, essentially not work for free. So this is how the system was created. So policing in America started from this. So when you look at a system that supported slavery, supported Jim Crow laws, and all these other atrocities that happen to Black and brown individuals, I think that's where it starts. And this system of oppression that is meted out against folks of color throughout this country from the beginning to now, present day, is one of the main factors why folks are caught up in this particular system, especially Black and brown individuals. I'm not saying all police are bad, but what I am saying is that there's ample evidence to show that there's a total racial disparity when it comes to those who are arrested, especially as it relates to Black individuals and white individuals. There's a Black individual is 10 times more likely to be arrested for a crime than a white individual. And it's kind of an ironic kind of situation where in many respects, when you talk about slavery, you had some slaves who had to work until they received money so they can buy their own freedom. And when you look at the prison basically developed in a way of creating like a new form of slavery, where it says that all men are created equal, except in those cases of someone in the committance of a crime. And during the late 1800s, where we were supposed to be free, you had many folks in the South who would be arrested for loitering, or children that would be arrested, and then they would be placed back into servitude.
These are copies of contracts from 1891, 1893, and 1895 between the Galveston-based Ball Hutchinson Company and Texas State Penitentiaries. The contracts are for farm labor.
So in the contract, the number 2 stipulation is that the convicts whose labor is to be furnished under this contract shall be Negroes.
That line is disturbing and very telling for activist Samuel Collins.
So it was not just simply about convicts. It was specific convicts that they were trying to basically re-enslave.
It has to do with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolished slavery. The amendment reads, in part, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, shall exist within the United States." All of that made perfect sense to me, minus this one part, except as a punishment for crime. Basically, that says you can punish a criminal with slavery. And we do, all over the country, all the time. It's called prison labor. We're all sort of familiar with the idea. Prisoners making license plates is the classic example, but that is the tip of the iceberg. Across the country, convicts do work in carpentry, sewing, mining, packaging, firefighting, telemarketing, fish farming, and artisanal cheese making. That last one is why this is back in the news. Whole Foods took some flack for selling felon-made cheese, and at a pretty hefty markup. Now, according to the American Civil Liberties Union, this isn't inherently a problem.
Most prisoners want to work, and jobs for prisoners can be a very positive thing.
That's David Fauti from the ACLU's National Prison Project.
But given the vast power inequality between prisoners and their employers, there's also a real potential for exploitation and abuse.
That potential is grounded in the fact that this really is slave labor. Inmates can be forced to work as long as they're deemed fit, and can be punished if they don't, including, in some cases, with solitary confinement. And then there's the question of money. We don't have to pay prisoners a dime for their work. Some states do require that prisoners are paid, but courts have consistently ruled that any pay is, quote, by the grace of the state. In other words, just to be nice.
It's so many different connections, right? Sometimes people commit crimes just so they can eat, right? And so one of the things that we should consider, or maybe we should consider a universal basic income. Maybe we should consider trying to make sure that there is parity. I mean, the income gap between white Americans and black Americans is still so ridiculously wide that if there isn't something done about that, then the poverty to prison pipeline will continue. And for some people, they want it to continue. Some people, they want it to continue. So there's a lot of different things that need to be done. One, we need to make sure people have jobs, they have a stake in their communities, they have access to medical care, health care, they have access to job training, education, things that will allow people to arm themselves to get the skills that they need so they can either get a job or start their own company or start their own business or something to that effect. If we don't give people that, then they will not ever be independent. If you only give them government handouts or just minimal assistance, that's never going to do anything for them. Let me give you an example. When I was young, I was in college, I got pregnant, I had to drop out of college. I didn't have any money. I grew up in the projects. I didn't think that I would make the same mistakes, but I did. And here I was, pregnant and dropping out of college, and I had no resources. I had to go get public assistance. I had to go on welfare. And I remember I was one semester away from my bachelor's degree. I remember going to meet with a caseworker, and I remember her saying to me, "You have to get a job." And I said, "Well, listen, I am one semester away from a bachelor's degree. Let me go back to school. I can do the same time, I'll put in the same hours. Let me go to school, and then I'll be off welfare. I'll have a bachelor's degree. I'll be able to do something." They told me that going to a school where there was any type of matriculation, this is what they told me. If there was any matriculation, that program would not qualify. I would not be able to go to school and keep my benefits. The only way I would be able to keep my benefits if I became a part of the WEP program, which was the Work Experience Program. And I remember saying to the worker, "So you want me to go clean up the park instead of going to school to finish my degree? That's what you think is best for me?" And that narrative, that story is told over and over and over to people who can't say, "You know what, I need this degree more than I need these benefits." Maybe they don't have family and friends that they can turn to and say, "Listen, I'm gonna be cut off and I might not be able to get no food. Would you be able to help me? I just want to go back to school." There are a lot of people in that situation and in that position that if the government could qualify programs where like bachelor's degrees, then maybe that would give incentive to people to get real education, get real skills so that they could get off of those roles, get off of the welfare rolls. I was one of those who I had to decide. I'm not gonna go do the WEP program. I did, and they cut my benefits off. And then I had to beg my mother and anybody who could help me till I finished that. And then I had to get a job. And then I worked. But that's what I'm saying. It seems like everything is set up to keep people poor, to keep the poor, right? It seems that way to me. And I've been poor, so I get to say this because I know how hard it was. It felt like every time I tried to get out of the poverty circle, there was some structure that was trying to get me back in. So I think that there's a huge connection. That's only one of the things I think that the government can do in terms of trying to stem the flow from poverty to mass incarceration. I think that's one thing. Education is another. When we talk about the prison pipeline, the public school to prison pipeline, we are talking about how children of color are treated in the public school system. And I can speak about this personally again because my son was a public school. He's 20, he'll be 24 soon. But when he was in public school, he was very active, like many boys are, where I call it boy energy. Oftentimes, boy energy, especially with Black and brown boys, that energy is mistaken. It's not taken as something that could be harnessed into anything constructive. And what happens is that they then streamline our boys into things like special education classes and label them as having behavioral issues. That follows them. That follows them ultimately throughout that public education. And then when that label becomes too much for that child to bear, they drop out and then they become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
We have a system of education in this country that doesn't necessarily provide the best direction for our youth. I think that's where sometimes it starts. You know, when you hear individuals talk about, you know, the school to prison pipeline. And I think that that's a real thing. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I myself have been a part of this system that didn't necessarily understand me, didn't understand how I would like to be taught, how I need to be taught. I was often taught by teachers that didn't come from my community, didn't understand who I was, who I am, didn't understand my Blackness, and in many cases decided to, you know, push me towards medication and other things where I just may needed somebody who understands where I come from. And I think for our children who are raised in this particular system of education that is not really identifying their uniqueness, their need to be taught in a way that they understand, oftentimes they get ushered out of this system of education into the system of incarceration.
Because we have finally gotten more police officers on the street. That was one of the goals that the president had when he pushed the crime bill that was passed in 1994. He promised 100,000 police. We're moving in that direction, but we can see it already makes a difference. Because if we have more police interacting with people, having them on the streets, we can prevent crimes. We can prevent petty crimes from turning into something worse. But we also have to have an organized effort against gangs. Just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
And I find that in the work that I do, working on Rikers Island, Horizon Correctional Facility, where I'm working with, you know, teens, 13, 14, 15 years old, who should, by all accounts, be in high school, on their way to college, but instead they're in juvenile detention centers, possibly on their way to upstate New York.
There's this phrase that you might hear in the news sometimes, the school-to-prison pipeline. It's shorthand for how schools are funneling students, especially Black students, into the criminal justice system. It started in the 90s when schools responded to fears about crime with zero-tolerance policies, which mandated suspensions and expulsions for certain violations. They also cracked down on little things like talking back or uniform violations. The hope was that it would keep bigger problems from bubbling up. But as a result, out-of-school suspensions have doubled since the 1970s, and they keep increasing even though juvenile crime rates have now been dropping for years. Around the same time, the number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by a third between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. Sometimes the results are shocking. But the less visible effect is that schools are feeding the racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consider the fact that schools are more likely to have an officer on their campus if the student population is more than 50% Black. You might assume that that's because there's more crime at these schools, but although students at police schools are more likely to be arrested, they're not actually more likely to be charged in court for weapons, drugs, alcohol, or assault, at least according to one study. During the 2010-2011 school year, 1 in 6 public school students in the U.S. were Black, but they accounted for 1 in 3 arrests at school. Same goes for other forms of school discipline. Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more frequently than white students. It actually begins in preschool. 18% of preschoolers are Black. But if all preschoolers suspended more than once, 48% are Black. Studies show that differences in behavior can't fully account for these disparities. Black students and white students are sent to the principal's office at similar rates. But Black students are more likely to end up with a serious punishment. One study found that white students are more likely to be suspended for provable offenses like smoking or vandalism. Black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective offenses like talking back or insubordination. Students who are suspended in school are more likely to later drop out or get arrested.
Obviously, it's hypocrisy from the point of if you're the land of the free, then you wouldn't have policies that would make sure that a certain amount of your population is going to experience at some point in their life a prison sentence. You know, the school to prison pipeline is very much real in this country for a lot of people. And for a lot of those people for whom that school to prison pipeline is real, they don't even know that there's a certain percentage of these children, based upon their test scores in the 3rd and 4th grade, 8 years old, that are more than likely going to end up in our prison system when we accept that. And we don't put any policies in place to try to help them avoid that fate. So yeah, there's hypocrisy in that statement, because obviously it's not the land of the free for everybody, you know, and that's unfortunate.
There absolutely are metal detectors in the schools in my area. A lot of the schools in my area are run like prisons, as opposed to like really being able to be a place of education. Stop and frisk, metal detectors in schools, running schools like jails, and police brutality.
They say the NYPD stops and frisks way too many innocent men of color for no good reason.
He was holding me, he was going through your pocket, he was going up, down.
You want to go to jail?
For what?
Shut your mouth, kid.
What am I getting arrested for?
Shut your mouth.
What am I getting arrested for?
For being a mutt, you know what?
That's a law, being a mutt?
Even though blacks and Hispanics are a minority here, a majority of people stopped, around 84%, are young men of color. How many times have you been stopped and frisked?
7 times.
7 times?
Yes, sir.
And you're how old?
17.
In the first years of the 20th century, this whole new regime of laws had been put in place that essentially turned the American justice system on its head, and it became an instrument of injustice instead of a system of justice. And there were rafts of laws that effectively criminalized black life. It was almost impossible for a black man in the South, in the rural South, in the early 20th century, not to be at risk of arrest at almost any time, and the consequences of even the most trivial offenses were enormous.
This is a business. We have almost a $5 billion budget a year, so we run it like a business, and it's fair to ask the employees here to do their fair share.
Two Latino men were allegedly arrested for manspreading.
A young African-American woman, the officer charged her with being in a park after dusk.
Squeegee pests, we're not being overrun. Those will be taken care of very, very quickly.
I'm born and raised in the Boogie Down Bronx, and actually the police precinct that where I live, that we're under that jurisdiction, is the 43rd precinct, and they are the precinct that killed Amadou Diallo. And that happened some years ago, but that was like unprecedented, 41 shots. Now it's become actually more normal to do that. But at that time, like, it created a big rebellion. A lot of people protested. It created awareness, but it really hasn't changed much. You wouldn't see this in suburbia. You know, you wouldn't see police actively hunting down someone to call them a criminal and arrest them first before actually proving them to be even the person or to be guilty. So yeah, those things are quite the norm.
The criminal justice system is really a criminal injustice system. There's no justice for people that live in poverty. I was wrongfully convicted in 1987 for a homicide that I had nothing to do with. Not only did I have nothing to do with it, I had no knowledge of it. And it was mainly based in part on police misconduct and prosecutorial misconduct from this detective called Louis Scarcello, who fabricated a report indicating or implicated me in this crime.
2007 appearance of Scarcella on the Dr. Phil show, discussing the psychology of false confessions.
Are there rules when it comes to homicides? No, there are none. I will do whatever I have to do within the law to get a confession.
I stated there were no rules, but I operated under the law.
And later on during my trial, the prosecutor, he engaged in prosecutorial misconduct. The witness came before the trial court and exonerated me and told him I had nothing to do with it. He didn't see me on the night of the crime and that he didn't know me, but that wasn't enough for the DA. He told the court, he lied to the court and told him that he's gonna let the witness go, but that did not happen. What he did is he locked this witness up and threatened him with 7 years and told him if he didn't recant his testimony and come back and say that I did commit this crime, he would receive 7 years in prison. I didn't think that the criminal justice system would convict me for this case, not based upon that single witness. However, I was found guilty. There was no light shining in my courtroom, so they was able to get away with this, and they continue to get away with it. Right now, there's probably some youth somewhere right now crying out for help on something he didn't do. If you don't have no money, sometimes if you don't make the right connections, you're gonna get found guilty. There was no evidence to link me to this crime other than the exception of this coerced witness. And right now, I'm still wrestling with the Brooklyn DA's office about them overturning my conviction. But there's politics right now because the DA who did this to me is still in the DA's office. In fact, he's a high official from what I was told. So they're reluctant, they're dragging their feet, and they're using all kind of, frivolous claims.
We're just solely here today asking that the new Brooklyn District Attorney overturn our conviction so we can move on. Right now, I'm on life parole. My daughter lives in Long Island. I can't go see my grandkids and my daughter because I have to get permission. I can't vote. All I'm asking for is my true citizenship back.
So all this is predicated on racism. If I was white, I wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you like this. You don't see whites all over America speaking about how they was wrongfully convicted. You may catch one here, one there every now and then, but for the most part, all the people in this country who's wrongfully convicted look just like me. Black, and for the most part, they're males. That's predicated on racism.
Being in prison, it takes away so much from the individuals. And these young Black and Latino men that's in prison, they are branded already as felons, ex-offenders, criminals. And this follows them most of their life. So when they come out, they have no means of employment because a lot of them are afraid to go and ask or seek a job or hunt for a job because the first thing they are asked, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever committed a crime? And so they are reluctant to even talk to employees for a job. And many of them don't have skills. In fact, that's the reason why they're in prison, because they didn't have a skill, they didn't have a means of employment, so what they did was they resorted to crime. They resorted to selling drugs. They resorted to becoming stick-up kids or criminals in the neighborhood. And that took them completely out of the job market. And that has hurt many of them. And it has put a profound effect on their families and, of course, their community.
It's not necessary for anyone to be labeled a felon. It's not. And there are some states that allow for expungement provisions or sealing provisions. New York just started. We just got laws that allow for sealing provisions, not expungement, but sealing provisions for any misdemeanor or one felony that you've had in the past, I believe, 10 years or so, right? And so if it's 10 years old or more, you can move to have it sealed. All right, we didn't have that before. If you had a felony, you kept that for life. All right, so now we have that. So it's not necessary, right? It's not necessary. In fact, it's burdensome for us to label people who have paid their debt and not give them an opportunity to recover from that label. We're supposed to be a nation of second chances, right? But it doesn't seem like those second chances are available to everyone, unfortunately. They don't seem to be available to people that look like me. But there are expungement provisions and sealing provisions that can keep your future employers from knowing that you had a prior felony conviction. And so if you qualify, and a lot of people don't know about these provisions. They don't know that these statutes exist in their state. I've told many people in New York, and they didn't know that they exist. You have to avail yourself. Information is power. You have to go and see what is available in your particular state that will allow you to apply for expungement or a sealing or get a certificate of relief from civil disabilities. That's something else that that's available to you if you have a felony in New York, which might bar you from certain civil service employment. if you can demonstrate that you've stayed out of trouble, that you're living a law-abiding life, you can apply to the judge that sentenced you and ask for a certificate of relief from civil disabilities, which would then allow you to apply for those civil service jobs. So you don't have to be labeled a felon. There's ways that we are dealing with that as a society, and as progressive criminal justice reform moves forward, I think we'll see more and more states giving people second chances. I mean, we saw the fake second chance they were trying to give the prisoners in Florida. I believe they voted to give prisoners their right to vote back. And then I think the legislature enacted statute that said, well, if they're going to vote, then they have to pay, or something to that effect, which is akin to a poll tax, which is illegal. So we'll see how that plays out in the courts if that goes any further.
The fight over restoring felons' voting rights is really heating up.
Kansas state lawmakers are now trying to put limits on felons who want their voting rights restored. The House is aiming to clear up Amendment 4, which voters approved 2-1 last November. The amendment calling for the rights to be restored once all of their sentence, including parole or probation, is finished. A new proposal, however, requires felons to pay off court costs, fees, and fines before getting their voting rights back. That measure trying to create a clear way to determine who is and who is not eligible to vote.
We recently had a change in how marijuana is being applied in New York State. You know, it hasn't been legalized, but it's been decriminalized. And I asked myself, what does that mean? What does that mean for folks that use marijuana recreationally? What does that, you have other states, I think roughly 11 states right now that have legalized marijuana. So what is stopping New York State? But when that does happen, because I believe it will happen, when that does happen, will these same individuals who profited from seeing black and brown individuals go to jail for years in some cases now be the same individuals that profit from the legalization of marijuana? And I believe there should not be a legalization of marijuana in New York State without some kind of effective policy that provides support and resources for those individuals who have been negatively impacted by marijuana laws. And I'm talking about those individuals that were sent to jail, those individuals that was heaped with felonies and all these various things. It should not be an opportunity for the Philip Morrises and all these tobacco companies to now come into New York State and totally take over this. Because again, this will show that there is complete disparity when it comes to the application of laws and the application of the have and the have-nots.
Public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Personally, I have a dear friend who spent over 11 years in Sing Sing because he was in an apartment where they raided and there were drugs in the apartment, and he had a clean record, wasn't even involved. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time and did over 10 years in Sing Sing prison. I think it's under the Rockefeller laws. So he didn't see his daughter grow up. He came out and she was already a teenager, and that's just one example of how the American justice system has negatively affected someone that I know.
The crack era, we had all of these sentences where if you had an ounce of crack, you could get 7 years. Where if you had an ounce of coke, you get a year. The laws were made to keep us in there. And where was all of these drugs at? It was in the African American community. So when you have us selling drugs and get caught and you're getting 10 years and 15 years for something that's a non-violent offense, it's gonna stay high.
And soon, crack became a national crisis.
Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act imposed harsher sentences on crack than traditional cocaine use, leading to a decades-long debate that the law was unfairly targeting minorities and lower-income neighborhoods who couldn't afford the more expensive cocaine powder. Incarcerations in LA skyrocketed. By 1995, the California Department of Corrections increased its Black and Latino inmates from 21,476 to 88,376, more than a 400% increase. This led to broken families, an overblown foster care system, increased violence, and a growing skid row that crippled the nation.
You know, the Rockefeller laws here in New York State, which, you know, folks worked to strike down because it was driving up high numbers of blacks and Latinos getting locked up as a result of certain local policies. So even with like somebody like a Bill Clinton who signed a crime bill back in, I think it was 96, where the part of it denoted you'd spend that much more time in jail if you had crack as opposed to if you had powder and so forth and so on. So I used to hate when I heard people identify him as the first black president. I used to hate that. I was like, y'all looking at this man's policies? Now, on the financial tip, there was more money in the streets in the 90s. I'll give you that, you know what I mean? Folks were flourishing on certain levels, but in terms of certain other social policies and certain things that he was a part of, I knew that he was no friend of ours when it comes to the African American and Latino community, because certain social justice policies that he set were really devastated our communities. So mass incarceration is certainly not part of the solution.
The penal system or the prison system in New York State is full, stacked, and packed with Black and Latino people, young men and women. The impact that has on the individuals and on the community is devastating, because it separates and divides the family. And these young men are separated from their community, and it detached them from reality of the place where they grew up. So they become disenchanted, they become hopeless, and it has a very hardening effect on the children in their family. I remember one young man who was going to prison constantly, and he was on my caseload. And his family was so familiar with me that his young son said to me one day, and I was very sad by that. He said, Mr. Stewart, when I grow up, I want you to be my parole officer. I said, right there. I said, that's sad, because he thinks that's normal. So what it does is it depletes the community. All the young men are taken from the community, so the community cannot grow. It becomes empty and non-productive.
Some people don't need to go to jail. You know, a better way to spend our tax dollars on these issues with people going back and forth to jail is sometimes give them a program. You can create programs that people don't have to go in. They have a program in jail, a drug treatment program called KSAC. Now, if you get KSAC on the outside instead of on the inside, where people are spending all this money, you can give them the same kind of treatment, because most of these people don't need jail sentences, they need help. And you don't get that real help while you're in jail because there's so much other stuff going on. You know, so what kind of real help are they getting? There's still gonna be there's still tons of drugs in jail. People are sticking drugs in all kind of different ways. So create different programs where you don't have to always be sentenced to jail time. Every single time something occurs, you go to jail. There has to be an alternative. I think certain programs would do it.
How about education? I mean, that's the first one that comes to my mind. How about putting some of that money in other places? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. How about, this country is the richest country in the world and is 27th in education of all industrialized nations? How? That doesn't even make any sense. You know what I'm saying? There are certain countries who GDP, their gross domestic product, is maybe equal to that of the state of California, but they put that much more a percentage of their monies into education, and therefore they're running circles around the United States in terms of education. But it's all about what your priorities are and putting your money where your mouth is. So if you put so much money into building prisons and instruments of war, as opposed to investing in your people, that's what's gonna happen. Those things are going to happen. So, you know, there are different ways that can be addressed, sure. But it's about what are the priorities of the government.
It has been said that I have two alternatives: either go to jail or go to the army. But I would like to say that there is another alternative, and that alternative is justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
He refused induction on the grounds of his religious convictions on war.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger.
You know, Muhammad Ali is really important in this because when Ali refuses induction, there's a famous column in the New York Times written by Tom Wicker where he just wonders out loud what would happen if you had 100,000 Muhammad Alis. If you had 100,000 people who were prepared to do what Muhammad Ali just did, you would bring this war to a stop. So the draft resistors set that kind of as a goal.
It took an all-white jury less than a half hour to find Muhammad Ali guilty of all charges and specifications. He was sentenced to the maximum, 5 years in prison, and was fined $10,000.
No, I won't.
It's easier and it's more money in keeping people incarcerated, keeping them down. If we all are educated, then it's an even playing field. Why would they want an even playing field? Because if you're educated, he's educated, I'm educated, she's educated, now we're lobbying for their jobs. But if you keep us with a record and you can't lie for certain jobs, which is a form of racism, in my opinion, now you're not smart enough to figure out what's next, how to get out of this rut. You just keep doing the same rut. So if I don't give you more education, I don't have to worry about you. You're gonna have one or two choices, and usually you end up in the prison choice. Like you end up doing something dumb because you can't make it ends meet because you don't have the education to make ends meet. So what do? You go out and try to be slick, and you end up in jail. And it keeps the assembly line going, one after the next. We end up right back in there. So they don't want to educate us. Why would they?
It's actually a system to break the spirit. Like that's really what it does, and that's what it's there for. It's not to reform. It's not to rehabilitate, which it should be, and it could be that, but it's not that. Our revolutionary leaders were killed. Pedro Albizu Campos, he was killed. He was an attorney. He went to Harvard. He was a freedom fighter for Puerto Rico, and he was incarcerated and riddled with cancer radiation and basically taken away from the fight. But he was exposing what Puerto Rico was suffering years ago. And here we are today, and now it's all being revealed. But there's still so much change to go. So the way that they broke down Pedro Albizu Campos is the way that they break down our people every single day. It's happening right now. There are innocent people in jail right now, and they are being abused. They are under inhumane conditions. And it's all part of the system. It's all part of the system to break the spirit and to steal our freedom and our even remote fight for freedom. The will is to break the will of the people, but that's not going to happen. It's not happening. And I think that if we all stood up, we would make a huge difference, a huge impact in this change. Now is really the time.
Just speaking on the whole prison system and just myself being a formerly incarcerated guy, I'm still trying to understand what prison reform is. Like, what does that entail? Like, what is prison reform? What are you doing that's gonna make the prisoners not go back to prison? Because one, you have this thing, well now you don't have to say that you've been arrested. They don't have that box anymore. But the loophole for that is the background check. So when they do the background check and they check the background and they see that you're a felon, they just say, oh, no, we're not going to go that route. And that's their own discretion. They don't have to, and they don't have to give you a reason. So it keeps you from getting a good job. Me, I worked in corporate pretty much my entire adult life. I have a felony now, and I've had literally 8 job offerings. I was supposed to start working for the NBA this past Monday that just passed. I got there and they told me, oh, nope, we can't use you, you have a criminal background. 8 different times I've had this happen where I had a start date, starting salary, everything. And the moment the background check comes, they're like, nope, you can't do it. I'm sorry. So imagine if you got a guy that's in a job, gives his 2 weeks notice because now he thinks he's gonna get this great job, and they pull that kind of crap on him. What is he gonna do? Most guys revert back to what they know. You know what? I'm getting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. I can go on the street and get that in 2 days. I'm going back to the street. So that's what we end up doing. So it's a revolving door. Because you won't allow them to get a good job that they can be content. Not satisfied, but content with what they're making. So if I don't have any contention, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go and make my own contention. How am I gonna do that? I'm gonna go back to what I know. And what I know usually gets me in trouble.
He had 3 children, and when I left them, right, because that's what I did, I left them, my incarceration affected them drastically. They was raised without a father. I was unable to participate in any school activities that they were in. I didn't get a chance to play part in any of their upbringing because, I learned that a father is a very intricate component of a parenthood. So that impacted them drastically. Right now, one of my children, we're still going through it. We're wrestling with the fact that I'm back now and I'm trying to, position myself in her life. You know what I'm saying? And just try to be a father to her today, which is very difficult because there's a 27-year gap that is between her and I. 2 of my children, they're a little bit more understanding in terms of my situation. But God be the glory, I'm still working on it, I ain't giving up. And I really feel bad that I left them. Although I went to prison for something I didn't do, I'm not sitting here telling you I was an angel. There was, my lifestyle dictated that I would go to prison. And that day when I went, my children was affected by that as well. I realized that today, and I really regret that.
That's the problem. It's disproportionate to the problems that we have in society. We have untold numbers of people who are serving ridiculously long sentences for non-violent crimes or for crimes for which they suffered an addiction or a crime that they committed because it was motivated by an addiction or motivated by say for instance, you are being trafficked and someone is trying to rape you and you kill them, right? That person should not be in prison, but we punish those people if most of the time they are Black and brown people, unfortunately. So the problem with mass incarceration is there is no distinguishing between those who really deserve to be punished if that's what the system is built for, and I'm not so sure that that's even the reason why we incarcerate people. But yeah, I just it's a difficult question because built in the question, mass incarceration in and of itself, it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Mass incarceration is a crime in the United States. Mass incarceration is the problem. It's part of the problem. It is certainly not part of the solution in reducing crime. And I think the numbers bear that out because you're taking away men from their families. You're taking away people who could be productive citizens, productive members of society for stretches of time in their life when they could be earning, when their families need them.
See, that's the thing about having a criminal record or having one arrest. It tarnishes your life. When you go to get a job, it comes up. So this system really is in place to disempower our people. It disempowers our people. The corruption is unprecedented. It's already been exposed, and anyone that would dare speak out about it is punished. The guy who filmed the Eric Garner video, he's being punished right now.
We are on Baruch and Houston. Ramsey has just been arrested for standing off of the sidewalk while filming. The police arrest someone else.
My main goal is to put pressure on cops. Once they see a camera in somebody's hand or a phone in somebody's hand, like they quick to think twice, like, oh shit, I can't do what I wanted to do. Well, together I have 5 bail bonds. Are exposed literally the modern day lynching. That's what happened. They choked him to death. I don't regret it, but I don't want to be dealing with this shit. I'm about to go give up some time for my life for taking the video. It's gonna be a rough ride.
It can be considered hypocrisy on certain levels. You know, you might think that those same folks who are being incarcerated, some people tend to think that the system was never set up for them to succeed in any event. So when you say the land of the free, that needs to be qualified, because there are some people who could be considered free here. But at the same time, those are not the people that are going, you know, they're being incarcerated in like such immense numbers.
To work in prison, I know they have a system set up, you know, when you first come through any jail, you know, you're required to either go after education or some type of program or some type of job. I think the job requirements are mainly, you know, whoever your needs are at that time when you first come in the jail. And if I may, I just like to add that I don't really like to use the word inmate. I think the new terminology would be someone who's currently incarcerated. Like for me, although I have a prison experience, I'm someone who's formerly incarcerated, because at the end of the day, I'm still a person.
Companies like Victoria's Secret, Whole Foods, and Starbucks have used prison labor. Paul Wright exposed those stories.
What percentage of prison labor is corporate America?
It's actually pretty small. I mean, and I think that, you know, this may be bad for your story, but the reality is that at any given time, there's around 5,000 to 6,000 prisoners employed by the private sector in this country.
But the truth is, most prisoners aren't working for private companies. They work for the government. Cheap labor keeps the prison system running.
So, what are they doing?
They're doing, primarily what prisoners do is they run the prisons. So anything that has to get done in a prison, unless it's security related, usually prisoners are doing it. So they're doing plumbing, they're doing maintenance, they're doing custodial and janitor services, cleaning, they're cooking food, they're serving food. Literally anything you can think of that is needed to run a prison, prisoners do.
So the prison saves a fortune by making the prisoners run the prison.
Millions, tens of millions, yeah.
They save tens of millions.
There was a GAO report in 1993 that said it would cost prisons hundreds of millions of dollars more each year to pay prisoners minimum wage for the work that they did. So prisons are saving hundreds of millions of dollars by employing prisoners. And when we crunched the numbers, we found that the median wage in state prisons was 20 cents an hour. And the median wage in federal prison was 31 cents an hour. And in a number of states, they don't pay anything at all.
What?
Yeah, oh yeah. In Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, and Alabama, prisoners are not paid for their work at all.
I was in Kasaki, and I'll never forget one of the assignments that I was put on was working on a horse farm. And they had acres and acres of land. And they had this big truck that would scoop the grass into the front. In the back, it would kick out a bale of hay. And there were like 6 of us. It was like 4 dudes on the truck and 2 dudes walking behind the truck. And we would literally have to pick up the bale of hay and stack it on the truck. And they would stack the hay this high. And they sold that hay to different farms and different horse farms around the state. Like upstate New York, there's a lot of horse farms, you know? So I felt like I was in Roots or something like that. It was crazy because here I am baling hay in a freaking horse farm in upstate New York. Like it was crazy. We didn't have no shirt on. It was wild. And I like being outside, so I may have even asked for the horse farm. I don't even remember. But yeah, we used to bale hay, man. And we got paid for that. We did get paid for baling hay in Kaksaki. Again, I'm 16, 17, 18 years old, was baling hay in Kaksaki for like 12 cents a day. and he was selling hay to the horse farms. So that's it.
Peonage, which is essentially debt slavery, where a person is held against their will to work off an alleged debt to a landowner or to someone who has purchased them, essentially, and that's the language that was used, buying and selling. Someone who's been purchased from a county jail or purchased from a state prison system, and that's what had happened to Green Cottonham. He was arrested on a charge of vagrancy. He couldn't prove that he had a job in 1908. He couldn't pay the enormous fines. It was essentially 2 years' labor was the fine for vagrancy. He was immediately sold to a coal mine on the outskirts of Birmingham to a company that was then going to pay his fines off 1 month at a time. But instead, 5 months later, he died under horrible conditions in a coal mine outside of Birmingham owned by U.S. Steel Corporation.
Usually in the prison system, because of the 13th Amendment, you are allowed to be paid as a peon, basically. Peonage, 25 cents an hour. 40 cents an hour, 60 cents an hour, whatever it is, depending on the type of work that you are able to get in the facility. But the 13th Amendment's exception clause allows for indentured servitude. It also says expressly that there shall be no slavery or indentured servitude unless you are convicted of a crime. And so everyone who is convicted of a crime in the United States under our laws, under our federal constitution, it's lawful for you to be treated like a slave. Go on indentured servant. Neither is better than the other.
Here, many of the prisoners are enrolled in a prison labor program where the inmates work for far below minimum wage. Some people see these programs as a good thing, training inmates for skills they can use when they're released, while others see it as modern-day slavery.
I'm gonna say 0%. I'm gonna say 0%. Without having done a whole lot of research on Courtcraft, that is a profit-making industry and business, and they are not looking to reinvest in inmates in any way that will help them outside. Now, they might gain some sort of trade experience as a result of the work that they do there, but it's not as if Courtcraft is setting up, that I'm aware of, is setting up some type of help them find jobs when they get out within that field that they were trained for in the prison. I don't think any part of that. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. At the end of the day, it's always about the money. It's always about this country. It's always about the money.
We're saving a lot of money. We're using the materials. The labor is very cost competitive. So we are saving, at the end of the day, taxpayer dollars. Our purpose as the director is to ensure that our inmates are given a skill set. They receive training, not only education, but a skill set, so when they leave the system, that hopefully they could go get a job and not be a repeat offender, and thus reduce recidivism. And that's my goal as the director for the Department of Corrections.
Slavery was about money. It was about money, right? Subjugate and discriminate, all of that was about money and power, because money in this country equates with power, right? So that's always the case. That's always the case. It's always about money. So I don't think that they are required to give back. I mean, that they're a private company. I don't know that they're required to give back anything to the inmates, because I certainly don't think that they do. I mean, if they cared about giving back to the inmate, then they would pay them a living wage, or pay them a decent wage, at least something that they could send back to their family. But they get in commissary money, if that, so they could get some cupcakes in the bar. So, if that.
Well, for me, I never took on one of them type of jobs. As I just mentioned, I always looked at that as a slave shop, and they just slave labor, and they're using our labor, to build up their economy. So I never went into that area. But I know there was many other individuals who did venture off into that area, because they felt at the time it paid a little bit more than other jobs. For instance, in certain shops, they may give you $35 every 2 weeks. In prison, so to speak, that's a decent amount of money to have to make a commissary buy. It was very difficult. I mean, there was times that I was unable to make, a commissary buy. A lot of times we get help, from over the wall. What I mean by that is, we reach over the wall and we ask our loved ones to send us, some of the things we need, like food or some money to supplement the income that we're receiving. But it's very hard. They pay you slave wages inside the prison. It's not really worth it for the work you do. We call it slave wages. So it's very hard.
This was repealed November 3rd, 1926. My father was alive. Section 6 said, if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country as required by this act, if guilty upon trial, shall receive upon his or her back not less than 20, no more than 39. We'll beat you. That if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country within the term of 6 months after receiving such stripes, he or she shall again receive the same punishment once every 6 months until he or she shall quit the country. We're going to beat you till you leave. But you're free. The playing field is leveled. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Are you following me? So he went back to the plantation. Let's go back. He went back to the plantation to be a sharecropper because that's the only place he could live. But he can't read or write because it was illegal to educate a slave. So I'm illiterate. I go back and I say to the slave owner, past slave owner, okay, now I'm coming back to work for a fair wage because I'm free. And the slave owner says, sure, you can come back. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to advance you seed, tools, and a mule. In other words, I am going to give you that grant that you want. And we're going to let you work with that. And at the end of the year, we'll settle up. Well, the grant's never enough, is it? And so at the end of the year, he's found owing. And what must he do to pay off that debt? He's got to work it off, yes? And his children have to work it off, yes? That's called debt servitude, or another form of slavery. But you all are free. What are you whining about? Let's move forward. So, well, can we lease them? Now, everybody wants to know big issue. You have overrepresentation here. Guess how I know? Overrepresentation in the criminal justice system has its etiology. It was big business then. It's big business now. You're going to get free labor one way or another. New slavery is imprisonment. Well, let's see. Why was this? It was so successful. By the mid-1898, nearly 3/4 of Alabama's total state revenue came directly from this institution. Well, of course, I wanted to do research on what they did, because they're free. But now we're arresting them at alarming rates. And for what? 12 years for vagrancy, loitering, startling a white woman, looking menacingly at a white woman. That's what they got 10, 12, 15 years for. And many of them, 25%, died under convict lease, more than during slavery, because there were no protections, because now we have another label to justify our behavior towards them. And what's their new label? Well, after all, they're convicts. They're criminals. Don't they deserve it? Do you see what I'm saying? So when did it end, is the question.
With respect to this system has been in place in terms of the cash bond system, where it has caused division amongst, it's sort of like the have and the have-nots. You know, many people that come from the communities of color, low socioeconomic classes and statuses, they are unable to afford bail. And as a result of being unable to afford bail, and dare I say unable to afford proper representation, folks are often incarcerated for months, years, without any kind of real recourse, because they lack the funds and the income to really fight or buy their own freedom.
Well, I think that there's been a strong movement for criminal justice reform, and one of the things that finally people are paying attention to is bail. And I think that that might be as a result of Khalif Browder in his case, in which he couldn't make a meager bail. I think his bail was $3,000. And he refused to plead guilty because he said he didn't do it. And unfortunately, he stayed in prison because he wouldn't take the deal. I'm glad that there is criminal justice reform, particularly in New York. There are new laws that will be effective in 2020 that will allow for judges to release people who are accused of nonviolent offenses or misdemeanors without bail. Okay, without bail. So we are moving towards a system in which we do not criminalize poverty, and I'm happy about that. It needs to go a little further, because even though you may be out, you still may not be able to get adequate representation. And I think part of the problem is that those people who provide services for indigent defendants are not adequately compensated, they're not adequately trained, and they're not adequately staffed. Okay, and so even if you get out, right? So you don't have a bail or you make bail, you might still avail yourself of a plea deal, because one, you don't feel like the lawyer that you've been assigned, because you can't afford an attorney, is working hard enough for you, or is working in your best interest, or you think might be working with the DA. I hear a lot of people think that, they're working with the DA. And so that's part of the problem, right? So we might make some strides there, but we also have to continue to request and require that states, not just the federal government, but that the states provide indigent defendants with competent counsel. Competent counsel, and it's not competent counsel does not mean some guy or woman who's been out of law school for 5 minutes, who's got 500 cases on their desk that they can't possibly manage.
When a defense lawyer doesn't do his or her job, justice suffers, and the defendant may even be wrongfully convicted, in which case the real perpetrator remains undetected. Earl Washington Jr.'s case is just one example of an exoneree wrongly convicted based on inadequate defense lawyering. He was convicted in Virginia after a trial lasting less than 5 hours. His lawyer had never handled a death penalty case before, did not challenge the confession, or hire an expert to develop why Washington confessed due to mental retardation, and called only 2 witnesses in Mr. Washington's defense. Washington would come within 9 days of execution and would spend 22 years in prison before DNA exonerated him. A review of convictions overturned by DNA testing reveals examples of incompetent and overburdened defense attorneys, including those who are sleeping or drunk at the trial level and on appeal. In general, the defense case brought on behalf of these innocent people was short and weak. Because post-conviction DNA testing can only be used in a very small percentage of all criminal cases, the trials of these innocent people represent only the tip of the inadequate defense iceberg.
That's not competent counsel. So we have to do better in that. I think that would reduce some of the plea deals. I think the plea deals will be reduced. We change the law and people are out of prison. Because the problem with those people who cannot get out is that they then will plead guilty to a crime they did not commit just to get out. Just to get out. Take for instance, someone who, say he has a good job. Say he works at Con Edison, right? Good job. One of these Verizon type jobs, right? Goes out for a cup, has a drink, driving home. He doesn't think he's drunk. He had 2 drinks. He gets pulled over. They tell him to blow. He blows a 0.1. That's not super drunk, but it's over the legal limit. So now you're arrested. Let's say 9 years ago he had a DUI, right? So now you have a felony DUI because within the 10-year period, you caught another DUI. Now you have $5,000 bail and you don't have $5,000 just laying around and you can't make bail. So you miss work Monday. You're gonna miss work on Tuesday. You're gonna miss work on Wednesday. And you probably will lose your job, right? So not only can you not make bail, you now have lost your job. You probably, if you have to stay in prison for any significant period of time, and when I say significant, I'm talking 30 days or more, you might lose your housing. You might lose your housing. Your family, your wife, your girlfriend, she might leave, right? I'm not doing this with you. No, right? And so your entire world has fallen apart simply because you don't have the resources to make a bail or hire competent counsel. And you, under the stress of that, might say, I'm going to take a plea. I'm going to take a plea because I need to get out of here. One, I got to go to work, right? Or I got to take care of this, or I have to take care of that. Or if you have children, right? What about the women who get arrested who have small children? All of these factors come into play. So I'm really glad that there is a push for criminal justice reform, and that we will see more and more states enacting legislation that doesn't require bail for anyone who is charged with a nonviolent crime or a low-level misdemeanor. I think that would do wonders for many, many defendants, and it will keep them from pleading guilty just to get out.
Mass incarceration means that we've got a very high rate of incarceration historically, comparatively. And the other thing is the rate of incarceration is so high, so socially concentrated, that we're no longer incarcerating the individual, but we're incarcerating whole social groups. The rate of incarceration now is about 5 times higher than it was historically. Historically, it was 100 per 100,000. Now it's about 500 per 100,000. If we look at prison, if we add jail to that, it's about 700 per 100,000. Nowhere in the world incarcerates as much as we do. We've seen extremely high rates of exposure to the criminal justice system for African American men with very low levels of schooling. So if we think about black men who were born in the late 1970s and who were growing up through the American prison boom of the 1980s and the 1990s, the chances that they're going to serve time in state or federal prison if they dropped out of high school is about 70%. So going to prison for that group of black men with very low levels of schooling, that's become a normal life event. And that's really only happened in the last 10 years. We're at this point now where there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. And that's about 1 in 9. The research shows the kids who experience parental incarceration have diminished school achievement, they have behavioural problems, depressive symptoms, acting out. And there's also evidence that these kinds of negative effects associated with parental incarceration are concentrated more among boys than among girls. And there's a very real risk here that incarceration becomes an inherited trait. The underlying issue is we've chosen prison as a way to respond to that problem of crime. And there are a whole variety of ways that we could have chosen to respond to that problem of crime. We've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty. And we've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty for a historically aggrieved group whose liberty in the United States was never firmly established to begin with.
Now, I have a number of cases that come to mind, but one in particular is older gentleman. He's about 50 years old, never been incarcerated a day in his life. So there was a scenario where he was, taking care of his family. He got with a woman. They were in a serious relationship. She had 3 children with him. They had 3 children together, and he moved her into his apartment. So this was an apartment that was left to him. So as a result of moving him into the apartment, he's taking care of his family. The woman went to public assistance and essentially got on child support. So while she was living with him, she got on child support. And he was like, why am I paying child support for a family that I'm taking care of? So he went to court, and the judge ruled the woman was committing fraud. So she advised the woman to go back to public assistance and tell them that, you're doing something wrong. This was fraud, so on and so forth. So rather than do that, the woman filed charges and said he assaulted her. And basically, he was arrested for assault. And what I say, his life was negatively impacted because he had never been arrested before, and he went to Rikers Island. And for those of us who aren't aware of Rikers Island can be a very, very unfortunate place to be. The human trauma that goes on in that island is very devastating. So this individual was being violated, and a number of things happened to him as a result of being incarcerated. So rather than fight the case, which he, there was no evidence that he did anything, that he assaulted her. Rather than fight the case, he essentially took a plea for assault, and just to get off Rikers Island. And I think that, and I say his life was negatively impacted because this is an individual who had never committed a crime and was actually doing something to support his family. But as a result of, this unfortunate occurrence, he could not afford bail. He could not get off Rikers Island, and he wanted to go back home to his family. He essentially took a plea bargain, which now is forever instilled on his record.
And I'm going to tell you another secret. The system cannot handle people going to trial. If everyone said, I'm not taking a plea, I'm not taking a deal, the whole system would collapse. Over 90% of the people that are charged with crimes take a plea. Don't plead. Don't plead. Watch those buildings crumble. They cannot facilitate the trials that would be required. They couldn't do it. They don't have the manpower for it. That's why the plea rate is so high, because that's what makes this system function. So we need to stop doing that. And part of not doing that is to get people out of jail, get them from under the prison, because that is an impetus for them to plead guilty. They just want to get out, right? And if I've been in for 9 months and the prosecutor comes to me and offers me 9 months, that time served. I don't care if I didn't do it. I'm getting out of here. I've been here 9 months for something I didn't do. What's the likelihood that I'm going to go to trial and 12 people who don't look like me, who are not peers, might actually believe that I didn't do it?
You have individuals nowadays who, for nonviolent crime, who can't even afford $500, that are forced to languish on Rikers Island and other places as a result of not being able to afford this meager amount that some people would think is peanuts. But then you have the racial disparity amongst the have and the have-nots. So I think this system is a system that has been very devastating, I should say, to Black and brown folks. However, in the last couple of months, there is movement in bail reform policy. Mayor de Blasio has been, on the forefront of implementing certain laws that are changing the way bail reform will be applied amongst folks in New York City, in particular. And this will possibly go into effect, I think January of 2020. So I'm looking forward to see how these laws will positively impact, folks who come from my community, among other laws, such as the First Step Act, such as raise the age, where, young folks were forced to be on Rikers Island and in situations where, they could have possibly been provided with a program. And I'm looking forward to the changes because we need it. Folks in my community has suffered for hundreds of years. We're not talking about the last couple of years, hundreds of years. So I really want to see how that's going to affect us, and hopefully it will provide us the change that I know is possible.
Because what's going to happen is you don't get the help you You go to jail, you come right back out, do the same thing you did before, you go right back to jail. But it keeps the money moving. It keeps the assembly line going. So they don't really want to help you, because if you can they do something silly, you can lock them up, you can keep getting money, and everybody keeps getting paid. So why would I help you if I can keep you inside and keep getting money for you? They don't want to really help you. It's too much, it's too easy. It's just like the drug pharmacies and all of that. Why would I give you a cure for AIDS when I can keep you on this pill for the rest of your life and keep you spending $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 a year to get this? I'm not gonna give you a cure. That's one shot, maybe 3, and then you're done. And you're back to living healthy. But I keep you with it. You gotta keep coming back to me. You know, the government is a pusher just like everybody else. Prison is a billions and billions of dollar industry. Cold crack. They make so much money off of us. Why would they want to reform anything? Why would they want to stop anything? I don't get it.
I discovered that the co-founder of Core Civic, Terrell Don Hutto, started his career actually running a cotton plantation prison in Texas. It was the size of Manhattan, where inmates were forced to pick cotton, meet cotton quotas. He lived on the plantation with his family. He had what was called a houseboy, an African-American prisoner who had to serve his family. He ran the Arkansas prison system, which was entirely made of plantations. A federal judge had condemned what he called torture under Hutto. Inmates who refused to labor in the fields were put naked in solitary confinement. And he would run these plantations at a profit to the state. And it was his work and his ability to run prisons at a profit that attracted a couple of businessmen who proposed to him that they start a new company that became the Corrections Corporation of America.
Public policy is established primarily to protect the citizenry. It should be established to protect the citizenry. However, when you look at your public policy as it relates to the prisons and the way that states and the federal government are going to operate prisons, then it helps to know what are the motivating factors behind the policies that they're going to set. If in fact they have gone into business with private prison companies, then those private prison companies are partnered essentially with the government to provide prison services for them, are going to have incentives to make money. That's what companies and corporations, they want to make money. So now when you have people who are being sentenced for crimes to society, and if the government's job is to protect society from those among us who won't follow the everyday norms and rules of society, you're gonna have to look at how they're gonna structure those prison sentences. Are those prison sentences being structured to just have someone pay their debt to society and make sure that the society is supposedly protected from someone who's deviant to the norms? Or are those sentences being structured to help build the bottom line of a corporation with whom the government has partnered with? So, you know, you have to look at what the motivation behind those policies to find out, are they there to protect the people, or are they there to help someone else report good fourth quarter earnings?
These guys get the toughest assignments there are for fires, and they're only paid $1 an hour. Because if you act like an inmate, I'm gonna treat you like an inmate. If you act like a firefighter, I'm gonna treat you like a firefighter, and I do them both well.
It's like going into combat, and that's what we're doing out there, really.
Are you shoulder to shoulder with the CAL FIRE firefighters?
Yes. Yeah, we cut line together. We be out there. We're not split up from them. Like, we're not like, oh, bring inmates over here and them. Nah, it's not like that. We all out there together. We all out there helping each other. Like, if I walk by one and I see a CAL FIRE or any firefighter and he need help or something with the hose or something like that, I help them. Because they'll help us too. We all here to help each other and make sure everybody's safe.
How much money do you make?
$1 an hour.
When you're fighting the fire?
Yes, when you fighting the fire, $1 an hour.
So how, for example, last night, how long were you fighting the fire?
Probably 20-something hours. So we probably made $20, $22, $24.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think we should make, of course I would say anybody that got a job, you would think you should make more. I always thought we was getting $2 until I came to fire camp. But you know, it's cool though. I mean, we making money for something that we'll probably do for free anyway, just for the time cut. So it's all right. But I would prefer, yes, we get more money. Of course, anybody in a working position will want to make more money.
So you're saving the state, to say the least, a lot of money. Some say it's something like $100 million a year.
I don't know. I mean, of course that, I'm sure, but I mean, we don't even, some people don't even, we look at it as getting the time. The time cut is more than the money to us. We rather make the money for sure because we can still send money to our families. We still send money home, but yeah, we only make $1 an hour on the fires.
Can you vote?
No felons can vote.
You know, that's interesting because in Vermont and Maine, they can vote from jail.
No felons can vote in California.
Would you like to see that change?
Yes. But we can't talk about it.
This is, guys,
Okay.
camp only.
Okay.
Not voting politics.
Okay.
Camp only.
Some may not know is almost half of those men and women fighting fires are convicted felons.
23 ABC's Alyssa Flores visited one of the state's 44 conservation camps where inmates saved the state tens of millions of dollars on the life-threatening job in exchange for an earlier release.
It's like some of the hardest work I've done.
Make sure that the burn area doesn't get to the non-burned area, which make the fire spread.
12 hours at work and 24 hours to rest.
Hernandez, clear.
But it's not money these inmates are working for. It's their future freedom.
Hey, crew 2 and 4, breakfast is ready. Most of my life I've been in prison, and it's basically the taxpayers that have been providing for me. So when they say I'm underpaid, it's a matter of perspective. To me, I'm overpaid because I'm being paid back with freedom.
I mean, for the inmates, the taxpayers, it's a win-win.
As California wildfire seasons continue to become more destructive every year, the state's 2,500 inmate firefighters are valuable resources, coming at next to nothing in cost and saving the state about $100 million per year.
There's people behind here, good people. Very good people that's back here working and pretty much breaking their backs out here for CAL FIRE and CDC to actually protect homes.
They are told they will never, ever be allowed to be a firefighter.
Currently, you cannot be a felon and become an EMT firefighter.
It's bad enough that they've done that, but now they have put into place in those contracts a mandate that the jails have to be kept to a certain capacity. And to my knowledge, it's about 90% capacity that they sign these contracts for in order to keep it running. So obviously then, structurally, you're going to do things like not give the proper funding to services like legal aid services and stuff like that. You're going to overwhelm your legal aid societies because those are the ones who are handling legal services for the people at the bottom who can't afford proper legal representation. And therefore, you're going to create a feeder system into the jail in order to meet that 90% requirement. And your policies are going to reflect that.
They get to cherry pick the type of inmates they bring in, and usually they have these contracts that has like a clause, and it's a minimum occupancy clause, right? And it says 90% of our beds need to be full, and if they're not, the state still has to pay for the empty beds.
But the idea or the notion that making profit at the expense of prisoners and their families is pretty disgusting to me.
If you're looking at dealing with the overall of it, and whether I as an individual believe that we should be treating inmates as cattle and selling them and buying them and making sure that our prison is full of as many people as we can cram into a little space so we can make the most amount of money that we possibly can, there's something seriously wrong with that. People are people. They're in there, they're paying their debts to society regardless of what they did. Should they be a bargaining chip? Should they be used as profit? Should they be seen as dollar signs? I think when we as a community and as a nation have come to that point, something has went seriously wrong.
This society is racist as hell, continually, and that the vestiges from slavery, we see them every day manifested in the criminal justice system. And it is almost like the United States government said, we are aware that we have to abolish slavery, but we also need to make sure that we keep this commodity available to us, that is Black bodies. And so we have to figure out a way. And so there were things that were done, like the Fugitive Slave Act and things of that nature, that this is still the same. So we don't have slave catchers, we got cops. And they do the same thing. They over-police the neighborhoods of color. And they don't do that. Like, I live in a neighborhood where it's very mixed. It's not an urban neighborhood, it's in the suburbs. You never see the cops on my block. You don't see the cops. They do what's called reactive policing. That means that they don't come unless they're reacting to you. And that means they don't come unless you call them. That's not what happens in urban communities. They do proactive policing, meaning that they sit on your block. They stop you when you're walking. They ask you where you're going, what you're doing, let me search you. They don't do that in white. So if you over-police a community, then they will be disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. If you look at some of the case law, if you look at some of the language from early cases when the Supreme Court was speaking about Black people and how we have no rights that any white man should ever have to respect, that we are not citizens. We were not citizens in this country until the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, and if you go back in the history of that, there are some states, like I want to say Mississippi, that didn't ratify things like 13th and 14th Amendments until 50 years later or more. So what it says about our society is that this is still a white supremacist run country, and unfortunately, they have put things in place, structures in place, and real structures just that have proliferated and perpetuated this disproportion that we see in the prison system.
This boils down to bias. This boils down to racial injustice. This boils down to a system of oppression amongst folks of color. In looking at same crime, there was a case in the news, I want to say about a year or two ago, where a young fella, white guy, star on the swim team, was basically charged with rape. This was something that he actually did it. You had witnesses that pulled him off of this young lady. It was very traumatizing for her, and he received a slap on the wrist. Whereas other cases, we have it all over the country where, a young football player in another college, the circumstances behind it was he say, she say, or whatever, and this individual got years for this particular crime. So we see it in all manner of our society today. I don't care if you're from New York State, California, Arizona, you name it. We see this disparity, and it's sickening. There's a system of oppression that's occurred throughout this country. Black individuals are 10 times more likely to be arrested for a crime than white individuals, even if it's the same crime. And there's cases where in the federal system, you have a black individual will serve more time or roughly the same time for a nonviolent drug offense than a white individual will serve for a violent drug offense. So this system has shown that, there is racial disparity along the lines of how justice is meted out in our community. So that's one area.
I call it selective prosecution. Unfortunately, most of the prosecutors in this country, I want to say over 95% of them are white. Most of the people they prosecute don't look like them. Okay. I recently had a case in federal court where it was alleged that there was a slip and fall scam going on that involved a number of doctors and lawyers and then some cab drivers. Cab drivers who would shuttle patients to the lawyers and the doctors' offices. The federal government decided to charge just the black drivers. They didn't charge a white doctor, and there were several of them, or any white lawyers, and there were several of them, because they didn't have to, because they have absolute discretion in who they prosecute, because they get to choose who the criminals are, and they get to choose what evidence is sufficient. Now, here's another thing. Oftentimes, violent crimes are witnessed by Black and brown people because crime happens typically in these communities, right? That means that the witnesses are going to be Black and brown people. Prosecutors selectively prosecute Black and brown people because juries, whether they are Black or white, juries are more inclined to convict Black people based on the testimony of Black people than they are to convict white people based on the testimony of Black people. Prosecutors know this. And when they are evaluating a case, whether it's a state case or a federal case, and they're trying to determine whether it has what we call prosecutorial merit, and whether or not you can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt, one of the things you have to assess is your evidence. Your evidence. And if your evidence is 3 or 4 witnesses from the local projects who speak bad English, like we saw in Trayvon Martin's, the woman who came and testified, who was on the phone with him. I don't know if anyone recalls how the media pounced on her because she didn't speak the proper King's English. But to many of the people who were listening, she sounded fine, right? Because some of us understand broken, I don't know if you want to call it, I don't like the Ebonics term, but that genre or that dialect of English that's found in the hood, right? And so she got pounced on. Prosecutors don't like to use witnesses like that. When it comes to white defendants, they will never do it. They won't do it. They will not. At least not in my experience. So I think that has a lot to do with it. When you selectively prosecute Black and brown people, then they will disproportionately appear in jail. That's it. Because it's not that Black or brown people are more violent than white people. Look at the history of this country, right? The history of this country tells us that white people have always savaged what they couldn't have. Savaged what they wanted. And if they couldn't get it, they took it.
Seneca Village was an African American and Irish community that was founded in the mid-1820s, and it continued to exist until the park was created in the 1850s. Everybody was evicted from their homes in Seneca Village in 1857.
Which is why very few people know about its existence now in the 21st century.
However, the first African Americans arrived here in the mid-1620s with the Dutch colonists, and African Americans have had a strong presence ever since.
Many people forget that there was slavery here, that much of New York was built with enslaved labor.
We had slavery here in New York until 1827, when emancipation finally was completed.
And in fact, sadly, slavery continued in New York until 1841.
After 1827, when emancipation was completed, for New Yorkers, it was still possible, if you were a slave owner from out of state, to bring your slaves as property into the state until 1841.
New York, because it became the financial center of the United States, had important financial ties to the South and to slavery, and so much of the wealth that came into New York was derived from slave labor. The purchase of land not only bought you a piece of property, one also was purchasing the right to vote.
There was an amendment to the New York State Constitution that said that if you were an African American male, you would be able to vote if you owned $250 or more property, and if you had resided in New York for more than 3 years.
And of course, you had to be male.
And we also think that it was a black middle-class community.
We know, for example, that skilled tradesmen worked here. We've identified one of the inhabitants as a cooper, that is, as a man who made barrels. And so the state of New York used its legal power, its powers of eminent domain, to condemn the properties within the boundaries of the park and to evict the residents.
And if Black people at any point did manage to pull themselves up by the bootstrap, white people destroyed that too. So it's not that black people are more inclined to commit crimes or anything like that. But this selective policing, right, the proactive policing, coupled with the selective prosecution, directly is responsible for the disproportion that we see in prison.
Well, while I was a New York State parole officer, majority of my parolees were black and Latino. I covered an area called Brownsville, which is the 73rd precinct. About 1%, maybe 0.5% of my caseload were Caucasian or white people. In fact, when I was in Staten Island, which has a large white population, I did have a few more whites than regularly, but I still supervised a lot of those brothers from what they call the Charlene or Staten Island, Stapleton, Manners Harbor, and places like that in Staten Island. But normally I had like a very low percentage of white parolees, about 1%.
And I experienced racism on a daily basis when I was in prison in New York State. In fact, I didn't really understand what racism was until I went upstate to prison. You know, anytime they deny you some food, don't allow you to go to the mess hall, that was racism. That was predicated on racism. You know, anytime they get you in the yard, they beat you, that was predicated on racism. You know, they take advantage of stuff like that. You know, anytime you go to a disciplinary hearing and a hearing officer over sentence you for a menial crime, that's predicated upon racism. So I experienced racism daily. And, you know, once I became conscious of this and I had the courage, I would always speak out against it.
I think that protests are extremely important. I think everyone should feel that it's their duty as a citizen to bring awareness to injustice, and I think it is time to have a reform in place. I think it's important to have a screening, a whole entire screening of these police officers. The whole system has to change. Like, when it comes to reforming this broken system, what it takes is communication. It's going to take people coming together on a humane level. And I think if everyone collectively got together, it would make a huge difference. And what would help is having correctional officers that are not just officers, but are also social workers. If you look at the models that they have, like in Sweden and Norway, and in the Nordic countries, they treat their prisoners with respect. They treat them like human beings. Here in America has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. If we had education systems in place, if we put less money into correctional facilities and we put it into programming, after school programming, different trade schools, like even in our education system, we're not really teaching people how to get a job, how to manage money. But yet everywhere it tells you how to spend it. It tells you that we need to be all lavish, but like our people are struggling just to get food on the table. So I would say implementing programming, after school programming, more money into the community organizations that exist. I would say having, correction officers be actual social workers so that they're actually treating them on a psychological level. A lot of these police officers aren't even healthy mentally, but yet they are given the power to determine whether someone lives or dies. We have Eric Garner. He was put into an illegal chokehold. It was an illegal chokehold, and he was killed. It was put on camera, and that police officer still has his job, still has his pension, and still has gone free for murder. So I think that we have to really evaluate who it is that our police officers are going to be. I think Japan does that before they even give them a gun. Why can't we do those things? Look at compare the systems that exist that are actually working and implement them here. So those are my ideas.
The average young black and Latino boy or girl living in the hood, they don't see themselves in the hood. They don't see themselves as part of the hood. They just feel that they live here. When you take a picture, a photo of a group of people, and you're in it, the first person you're going to look for is yourself. So they don't have a sense of who they are. They don't know that they have potential. They don't know that they have the ability to overcome any obstacles that may be in their way or in their path. So they have to plan themselves as far as this system is concerned, because right now they have what is called a pipeline that makes them set up in a way that they go to prison. So they have to have a plan in order to not fall in those conditions that will put them in prison. I think one of the things that has to do is that the community has to come together. The clergy, the religious institutions, the community centers. When I was growing up, we had community centers. We had mentors, people that cared about us. Families were intact. So we have to get back and continue to have those kind of things and promote those things in our own family. And if we don't, then the community or the neighborhood is robbed of the resources and the power that's in each and every one of these individuals. So the community is a very important, it's a launching pad. It's a nurturing place that all the entire community, whether it's the clergy or the directors of community centers, have to come together and set some foundation and have what is called a life support system. Have a plan. I would give an inmate that's going to be released from prison, first of all, have a plan. Have a plan on how you plan to filter yourself back into the community, because the community is not the same that it was before you went into prison. It's a whole different phenomenon. You left for 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, but it's different. But have a plan on how are you gonna make it in your community. Constantly stay in contact with your family, because your family is your only means of support and hope. And if you're in prison and you had an opportunity to develop some skills, get some skills. Because the job market today in America is technology, it's high-tech employment facilities, and you need skills in order to function in the society that you're coming to. Try to find things that you can either volunteer when you come home if you don't have a job, get some training in something that you love and you desire to do, or get some employment, or go to school. That is what I encourage many of them to do, because they are looked upon, as they come out of prison, they are looked upon as scourge in the community. And a lot of the white companies will not hire them. So this is what I encourage.
It's boundless, it's endless. There's no one cure, because the problem is so widespread that it has to be attacked from a number of different angles. And it's not just for the government to do. People have to do, parents have to do, we all have our part. Everyone has a role. But again, like I said, there are certain structures in place because of the nature and history of this country that are a hindrance to our progress.
And my main objective today is to make sure no other youth end up like me. You know, I go around, I educate youth, I go inside schools, I go inside the schoolyards, I go inside the communities, and I speak to the youth, and I share my life experience with them. And I show them how I fell off, how I strayed away, I deviated from my mother's Christian values and moral teachings. I didn't listen, I thought I knew the answers. And that's how I ended up doing the 27 years. You know, and that's very important to me, because I know them communities upstate, they benefit off of people like me. And I want to break that cycle. I don't want another youth to go through what I went through. And I take that serious, you know. And, you know, today, you know, like one of the things I said when I was leaving prison, I wanted to leave prison as a fireman. because I want to be equipped with all the skills and tools to come out here and put that fire out that's burning in my community. And that's what I want to do today.
Something I was saying earlier about young people not feeling a sense of self. I meet once a week on Sundays, and we have a study group called the Knowledge of Self. The greatest knowledge you can have is the knowledge of self, to know who you are. What's your purpose? What's your aim on this planet? What do you want to do? How do you see yourself? And in this group, we kind of discuss how we can become aware of the things that we need to do as an individual. The other thing that I'm doing in the community, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of discontent. A lot of times these brothers and sisters go to prison because a lot of them dropped out of school very early. They can't read, they're not critical of things, they don't know how to analyze things, but they're bright in terms of what they know about society. They're very aware of what's going around them, but they don't have any directions. Out of that misdirection, they become angry, and they direct that angry at each other.
Over the past couple of years, watching on Facebook, where you see, Philando Castile or these various people killed on Facebook Live for all of us to see. What does that do to a community? What does that do to a people? It shows us there is this lack of justice to begin with. Terrence Crutcher and, him being pulled over for having a stalled vehicle, and, the police in the helicopter saying that's a bad dude who he's later to be killed. Or both Dawn Jean, the police officer who says that she went into the wrong apartment and shoots him fatally. These are various examples that we see that there's plenty of injustice when it comes to these various things. And I, for one, often speak out against it. I do that through my own work. And I think it's important for all of us to realize that this is something we need to do, not just as Black folks, but as people in general, because it can happen to all of us.
The knowledge of self is the greatest knowledge that any human being can have. There are people that have lived and died and never fulfilled their dreams. The sin of not doing anything is a sin that each and every person, and I think about this a lot, has to cope with. If you have a purpose in life, if you can see your purpose and you can do something about it, then you have to do something about it. The reason why a lot of our men, young men and young women go to prison because they don't see themselves as valuable. You have to see your value in life. And we can control our neighborhoods, and our children need to see that we control our neighborhoods where they can have a sense of hope and a sense of control. When you don't feel that you're in control, then you feel hopeless. So there's a lot of work to be done. We have many of our leaders that left legacies. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm, Kwame Ture, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Adam Clayton Powell. They left a wealth of knowledge that we can use to change the conditions of our community. But we have to use them, but we have to believe that we can make that change. God never changes the condition of a people until they seek to change those conditions themselves. And we have the power to make that change.
To me, it's important as a poet, as an activist, as an artist, to speak about the truth. I happen to consider myself a reflection person. I like to mirror the truth and show people, speak about what it is that we're actually going through. This platform is so important to inspire people so that they know that they're not alone, so that they know that they can also find ways to heal through the artistry. It's important to me because this platform is what helped me heal from the injustices and the things that I have suffered through. So I think it's important to use this platform and let people know that they can find help too. This is a poem I wrote called If Anybody's Interested. Authorities got hands on their sticks, ready and quick to pull out the proverbial whip, a Glock full of clips. While we're driving in our whip, cops are on their way to market, while we're the ones unarmed, not believing we're the target. Not recalling that to them we're just a Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, Eric Garner, human beings being murdered. Whatever happened to serve and protect? They break civilian necks and get a slap on the wrist. Unpoliced police mostly get away with it. I trust police the way I trust the government. In God we trust to see some punishment. We know the system is corrupted. Sometimes they get sentenced for their injustices, but most times they whistle by acting like they've done none of it. There's a long list of names spoken over walls of silence. In a world of violence, the tyrants don't get tired. Our brains are rewired to follow roads to nowhere. People growing scared, calling life unfair, complacent, like they don't care, afraid to make a statement. I declare, don't be another slave on the plantation. Divided segregation, displaced like First Nations. Suicide statistics are high in elevation. We're forced on reservations, modern gentrification, drug and liquor integration, militarization, sex cells on every station. It's a third eye invasion, terrorist interrogation, modern day enslavement. The color of your skin is under investigation, racial condemnation, ego inflation, superiority complex implementation. Stop and frisk statistics are rising for the innocent. But if you aren't interested, don't listen to this gibberish. Forget the politics of this matrix that we're living in. It's all part of the system, and it's always gonna be like this if you aren't questioning the roots of white privilege.